Can I just move us on to cleaning? Again, this seems to be the most frequently asked. It's at risk assessments. How do I open and how do I keep my building clean, Christian? And there's some real myths out there right now about when is a deep clean, what's a fog clean, what's an electrostatic clean, etc. And so thank you ever so much for joining us. Would you like to just sort of kick off and tell us a bit about Slip Safety Services, and then I'm going to hit you between the eyes with some pretty funky questions that we've had from our employers.
Good stuff. Yeah, happy to be here, Tara. Thanks for asking me. I've been supporting the sector with kind of cleanliness, hygiene and safety stuff for the last 10 years or so. So I've visited hundreds, if not thousands, of centres and facilities all around the country, and given advice or provided services or in the past products as well to try and help people to improve. So got some good knowledge there. I also work with quite a few of the insurers, lawyers and people like that. So from a risk perspective, got some interesting knowledge from that perspective as well.
Lovely. Thanks, Christian. So some people have included my own team with a question why I'm chairing this webinar today. And the simple reason is that I spent almost all of my career in ops. So walked a mile in your shoes, and I've been a lifeguard, I've been a DM, I've been a GM and an area manager, etc. And one of the reasons why we coordinated these webinars is I was trying to put myself back in an ops position and ask myself, what is it I really need to know before I reopen my facilities? So these high level strategic discussions that make no one iota of difference to me getting my treadmills clean. So Christian, you and I were talking in the lead up to this webinar about the challenges for leisure centres pre-COVID on keeping facilities clean. And I think it's fair to say it is a challenge for us. It always has been. You know, I recall being a GM or a contract manager, and it was just, you know, I just seemed to be on repeat about cleanliness over and over again. Not because I would, you know, felt strongly about it in terms of punishing the staff for something, but it was, you know, overwhelmingly the most common complaint we'd had from our customers. And LeisureNet have just completed, as you know, a consumer survey, and 87% of those asked what was the single most important thing when returning back to a leisure centre was cleanliness. Yeah. So tell us a bit about, harder breathing and aerosols and things like that, and the volume and frequency of, Boris managed to say in PMQs in his inimitable way. Trouble with leisure centres is, they've got lots of surfaces one might touch, and then he followed it up with a cricket ball, which was incredible. What's the truth in the amount of surfaces that you can touch in a leisure centre, and how can we mitigate against that?
Well, I think, as Ian said, we've got to hope and expect that users and members are going to be performing as much their own hygiene as they can. And I think, included in the UK Active Guidance, there's something specifically around providing sanitizers and stuff for members to use, and the expectation is, whether it happens or not, who knows, but the expectation is that, members are going to be engaging in doing this and trying to help to keep surfaces clean. So wiping down equipment pre and post is one of the points mentioned. Of course, if you're doing certain types of activity, like weights, you are going to be touching a lot of surfaces, but equally a lot of activities within a leisure facility, you're probably not going to be touching much at all. Or you're only going to be touching stuff that's your kit. If you're doing a yoga class, for example, and you've got your own mat and stuff, you're not really going to be touching much that other people are going to be in contact with. So, I think there's clearly there are going to be surfaces that are going to be touched, but I don't think any more than in something like a pub or a restaurant. And I think that's where the anger, if that's the word, I think it probably is anger, is coming from the sector. Okay, so
and could you sort of help us out with some of these definitions as well, Christian? So, and there's something in the chat box, and I've asked you this a few times. So I hear about I hear about deep clean, disinfection, sanitization. What is the difference? What is the order? If we get to, let's say we open on a week today, what do I need to do? Yeah, that would be great. What would I need to do to my facility before we open, when we open?
Yeah.
And kind of every time somebody touches something, or is it every hour? What's the frequency?
Sure. So if you look at the Fit Together framework, what it says is, I mean, there's 5 bullet points around cleaning and hygiene, and the first one is cleaning and disinfection regimes, in very simple terms. So what they're saying is cleaning and disinfection. So going back to your question about definitions, there's a difference between cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. So cleaning is removing soiling from a surface, whether that's visible or invisible soiling. Sanitizing is reducing the amount of bacteria or viruses on a surface, and disinfection is removing viruses or bacteria from a surface. You can't disinfect a surface, which is what the guidance says, until you've cleaned it first. So what we're seeing a lot of, not so much in leisure, but in other sectors, is people going in with these kind of Ghostbusters outfits and spraying disinfectant or sanitizing fluids around, but not doing any cleaning first, and therefore your sanitizer or disinfectant chemical is landing on top of the surface. But if that surface has got any contamination on it at all, even dust, which every building is going to have if it's been closed for 3 months, it's going to mean that that disinfection isn't effective. So you've got to do proper cleaning first, and then move on to disinfection. So C comes before D.
Okay, good. That's the sort of simple solution I'll need. So there's a couple of other things as well, Christian. It's just come up in the chat box actually from Craig. Thank you. What do we use? That's the other thing. You know, there's no sort of list of approved products or all the.
No, I mean, yeah.
Are they okay?
The problem is that, you know, if you did a search for a Google search for degreaser, for example, which is a common type of chemical that you might use in a kitchen, for example, you'll find there are 14 million results on Google for degreaser. So not all degreasers, I can tell you from experience, work in the same way or are as effective. You know, I've done exercises before with cleaning companies where we've had 10 different products on a kitchen floor, looking at, you know, hygienic testing results and slip testing results and aesthetics, and they all say degreaser on the bottle, but they all react in totally different ways. So it's about finding something that is going to be effective. In a lot of cases, you know, you might not need particularly strong chemicals. You know, I mean, I've been fairly vocal about, you know, we've got to get cleaning right and we've got to improve it, and as you said, Tara, the data from members backs that up. But I don't believe that, you know, every area of a leisure facility is dirty. Far from it. You know, there are, most areas are pretty good, but there are certain environments like changing rooms and showers, you know, that across the sector have been a challenge in the past. And so, you know, what we can do in the gym, for example, is much easier from a cleaning perspective. We don't need as much elbow grease. We just need to find something that's effective and invest the right amount of time into doing it. Whereas in a shower, for example, you know, if we want that shower to be properly clean and disinfected, we need to roll our sleeves up, find some effective chemical, find some good equipment, and really give it a proper deep clean before we then look to trying to disinfect it. So what I would advise people to do, and I don't make or sell any products, so I'm totally agnostic on this, is do a process, a kind of iterative process where, you know, you get something together that you think is the most likely thing to work and try it out. Don't just launch into, I'm going to clean the whole facility. Try something out and see, just sense check that it's going to work for you, and then move on if it works. If it doesn't work, try something else and figure out, you know, what's going to work for you. Because it's not like you can say, right, use this chemical everywhere and it's going to solve everybody's problems. It's unfortunately not quite as simple as that.
Do you, Christian, this is off piece here. If I can be brutally honest, I'm a GM, my staff are in furlough, I've got to manage expectations of getting those back in. I'm trying to communicate with my members. I'm trying to read all the guidance. What would be really handy from someone somewhere is, here's a crib sheet. So for floors, use this type of cleaner. For treadmills, don't for goodness sake spray things directly onto that plastic, you'll wreck your kit. Use wipes. There's nothing wrong with a hoover, provided that you clean the filter or something regularly. Yes, chlorine's okay, but don't rely on it. Use a degreaser in showers, and you can get it here, and here. Is that available anywhere? So I can just.
I think parts of that probably are available. I mean, we could certainly put something together. We've got most of this already, to be fair, that would be a bit more comprehensive. But again, it's hard to be too prescriptive, because again, you know, a descaler, you could say, well, use a descaler, but that doesn't necessarily mean that around your taps and around on your pool side, that descaler is necessarily going to work for you. But at least it would be, it would give people a jump start, because they'd at least be, you know, rather than having to start from zero and from scratch, how do I do this? At least it would be giving them a bit of a framework to try.
That honestly, Christian, you won't believe how helpful and how welcome that will be for so many people. I you know, if I were an ops now, I'd be looking for that immediately. Yeah. Okay, and then just another thing, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard, you know, that there is a magic spray you can use, that you can spray on kit and it will determine whether or not it's clean. Is that true?
Yeah. So one of the things we've been suggesting to people is to try to put a bit of science into this. So again, if you want to be disinfected, you need to be clean. But the problem is that you know, you could look at a surface, and the fact that it looks clean doesn't necessarily mean that it is clean, if that makes sense. So I use the analogy a lot of an operating theatre. If I don't know, I broke my collarbone and I had to have an operation, for example. I was run over by a car, not very pleasant. But if I'd been wheeled into the operating theatre and I saw the surgeon spitting on his hanky and wiping down the scalpel that he was going to cut me open with, I'd have been pretty reluctant to have that operation. Whereas had I been wheeled in and the scalpel was sat on the table, he could have just done that and I would never have noticed it or seen it, and the scalpel would have looked clean, but it would have been teeming with bacteria and dirt and things that I couldn't see. So trying to quantify the effective cleanliness is really important. If you were doing this kind of, you know, how PHE would do it, they'd be going in and swab testing and sending it off to a lab. That's not reasonable or practicable for people to do. There are a couple of tests that are available. There's something called ATP, which is quite common in the food industry, which does require a bit of kit, but it measures the level of kind of microorganisms on a surface in very simple terms. So it's a very, very good indicator of how clean a surface is. And there's another product called Fresh Check, which we've been recommending people to use because it measures the same stuff, but it's a spray bottle. So if you sprayed it onto your chopping board at home, just after you chopped up some chicken to put into a stew, you know, the chopping board would look clean, but if you sprayed it on, you would see that it's actually contaminated. If you then cleaned it and disinfected it and sprayed it again, it wouldn't change colour, and therefore it shows that it's clean. So I think that would be something that would be very useful for people watching. And there is I can send out the link. I think it's freshcheckuk.com, but somebody could maybe Google it. But if you put in CIMSPA in the checkout, I think you get 5% off or something like that. Because I sort of said to them, you know, we're going to get a lot of leisure centres signing up for this, so you should give them a bit of a discount.
Oh, brilliant! Thanks, Christian. Awesome. Just a quick point here from Keely about specific equipment such as pole vaults and high jump bars, etc. Keely, just in answer to that, again on our reopening website, each national governing body for sport is producing some very specific guidance on their reopening procedures. So I, for the life of me, can't remember if England Athletics have produced anything yet, but I'll certainly have a look. But again, just keep your eyes peeled on that website, because there is some sport-specific guidance available, and that gets updated fairly frequently. And then the other question here, Christian, is another one from Craig around, you know, what's your views on using hazardous products such as alcohol hand sanitizer an environment such as a gym where a static build-up is prevalent?
Yeah, I mean, there's various problems with alcohol-based sanitisers because they do leave. I saw a study which showed that the residual effect of those is less effective than other methods, because you're effectively because it's drying onto your surface, you are leaving some residues on. I mean, washing your hands with soap and water is I think the best advice, and that's what the guidance from PHE would say as well. So I think from a hand hygiene perspective, that's what I would be suggesting.
Okay, and then just again, slightly off piece here, Christian. In my head, I'm thinking, right, okay, so we just had a Group X class in the studio. Do I need to clean the floor every time between classes? Would you advise that? So I'll do some quick fire questions on you.
I would say, like in studios, what you want to try and do is think about getting up to the best possible standard throughout the facility. Get up to the best possible standard that you can for when you reopen, because the better standard you're at, then the easier it is to maintain at something like that standard. If you're starting off, not so great, then you've got to be doing a lot of cleaning between classes and things like that. Whereas if you're starting at a high level, you can do a sort of fairly minimal amount of cleaning. What I would be thinking about is, thinking about like a customer journey, and like you would when it comes to door handles and other touch points, walk through the facility and think, right, well, what's going to get touched on what frequency, and what activities are being undertaken. And just it's as the guy said, it's pragmatic, practical risk assessment stuff. So you won't necessarily need to be cleaning the floor, because actually, are people going to be touching the floor with their hands? They might not be. If they're not, well, how's the virus going to spread? Because remember, this is being spread through breathing, which is the point that was touched about before, and then breathing on surfaces, and then touching the surface with your hand, and then touching your face. If you're just walking on the floor, and nobody's going to realistically touch it, then that doesn't need to be as clean as a door handle or some equipment within the gym.
Okay, excellent. So let's just talk about.
I didn't really do very well at a quick fire answer there. Sorry.
That's okay. So let's just again in my head, I'm thinking, I've walked through so many sites that I've managed in my head over the last couple of months. So where I've got an older site where I don't have motion sense taps, for example. So we want customers to wash their hands with soap and water. How often do I need to clean the tap, the push button taps? How often do I need to clean the door handles? From the guidance we've put out, is just have a cleaning rota where you can state obviously that you have regularly cleaned it, whether it's every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every hour. What do you recommend for those touch points?
I mean, I would be tempted, I don't know the answer specifically, but I would be tempted probably to get some advice. And I can ask this question actually and maybe report back to people, but I would be tempted to get some advice from a lawyer about this, because I think, there's two sides to this. There's, we want to do the right thing, and there's also we want to stay out of trouble. And I know, if it's, for example, doing checks in toilets, an hour is kind of common practice now, and if you're doing it less frequently than that, that's quite difficult to argue in a court, for example. There's no precedent for this, but I'd be interested to get a view. I think somebody I was talking with said, they may even be on today, was saying, well, we're going to go through the centre and we're going to do a list of kind of the touch points by frequency of touching, and so taps would be very high on that, and we're going to say, right, we're going to clean those much more frequently than, for example, fire extinguisher, which is unlikely to get touched, obviously. So I think you've got to think about footfall, and you've got to think about frequency of these touch points getting used. But I would certainly be saying, taps in that scenario, I'd want to be cleaning them several times a day for sure. I think that would be, it's all about what's reasonable. Was it reasonable? If you're standing up in court, was it reasonable that was done, or was it unreasonable? And I think it would be reasonable that they would be cleaned several times a day.
Ian, can I put you in?
Yeah, just to support what Christian said, and I think you've got to put a balance of what's reasonable here. If you're using soap and water in the first place, even if someone has touched the tap beforehand who's had an infection on it, you should then be washing your hands underneath. And if you then have to touch the door, if you're putting a sanitisation unit directly outside with a sign saying, please use the sanitizer, you are going a long way to being seen to be reasonable. Clearly, you've got to do those interim steps that Christian talked about, but in reality, we do have to get back to some level of being able to operate. And if you think you've got to go in and clean in between every person, that just is not practical. We've not seen it in supermarkets. We've not seen it when you've gone to your petrol station where you've had to pick up the pump. There's some element we've got to put on to customers through signage and through observation that they've got to be part of this solution. So yeah, a regular detailed cleaning regime enhanced by signage and encouraging people to keep themselves clean.
Excellent, thanks Ian. Christian, just on a general note then, what advice would you give everybody? How do I get it right? What are my, memorable 5 things to remember about getting cleaning right here, sort of generally?
So this wasn't set up, by the way, but we've got an acronym with 5 points in about getting cleaning right, which is called ROTAS, ROTAS.
See, that's it appeals to me, Christian. Nice. Yeah. I remember C and D. Now I remember ROTAS.
So this is about how to get a cleaning regime right. So ROTAS. So R is regularity. So you'll have to excuse some of these words, but I had to get it to fit somehow. Regularity. So again, the frequency with which we're cleaning surfaces. So we all now know, because of what's been happening, that certain surfaces need to be cleaned more frequently than others. If we rewind to the past and we think about poolsides, for example, they would often, in my experience, be getting a kind of something close to a proper clean, perhaps once a week. So question mark, is that sufficient to keep them clean and safe in the new world? And that's a question to be posed. O is organisation. So this is all about the management of things. So do we know what outcome we want to achieve, and do we know how to deliver that outcome? One of the challenges I've seen historically in the sector is that I've never met a general manager or an area manager or an ops director or even a recreational assistant that wanted standards not to be good. Everybody wants cleanliness. Everybody aspires to facilities being clean, but people haven't necessarily known, how to achieve what they want to get, or indeed what good looks like. So if you think about, I got married, it was my 6-year wedding anniversary on the weekend. If I tried to put my wedding suit back on, particularly after lockdown, it ain't going to happen. But that's not because I've suddenly become fat. It's just that your weight kind of creeps up on you slowly over time, and cleanliness can kind of creep up on you over time as well. T is time. So we need to allow enough time to do the task properly. So, some people say I'm an expert at cleaning, but if you said to me, you've got to clean a whole changing village in 10 minutes, well, I can't do that. It's physically not possible to do that. So allowing enough time to do the job properly. A is all about staff. So A is for ability. And by that we mean, are they trained properly? So do they know what they need to do? Are they being supervised? And are they being motivated to do the right job? And S is system. So by that we mean, are we equipping them with the right stuff? So, the traditional blue stiff bristled brushes that you don't see that many of nowadays, but still some that you would see back in the day, to scrub floors with. Those aren't really that effective on many surfaces. So let's give these trained and motivated staff the right kit to enable them to do a good job. So if you can think about that as an acronym and a system, that will stand you in good stead.
Brilliant. Thanks, Christian. For me, I think also, you talk about regularity and time. I don't know how everybody in the webinar feels about this, but if I were running a site now, I would be very, very visible. I would be almost purposely annoying customers by saying, sorry, you're just going to have to wait for the changing rooms to be open for the next 25 minutes while we do a deep clean. Sorry, you can't use any of the bank of those treads for 10 minutes while the staff are very obviously, I would really be very, very overt about our attention to cleaning. I don't think that would do any consumer confidence any harm whatsoever. In fact, quite the opposite. You know, if you don't see a person, you know, lifting a finger all day, I'm pretty certain what decision I would make. But also, you know, go back to Ian's point about making very obvious to customers that they're part of this solution too. I think it's very, very important. The one caveat I would add to that, or caution, which I don't think is going to be anything out of the ordinary for anybody or a surprise, is don't rely on it. You know, if Bournemouth Beach or Brighton Beach or the state of bloody Soho, see, I'm the first person to swear because it really annoyed me.
I wondered how long it would take.
Well, you know, I was sat watching all of that go on at the weekend, thinking, like, pubs and restaurants are open and it looks unorganised chaos to me, and yet we can't open and we are organised and we have thoughts about it. I was quite incensed by the whole thing. But my point there is, don't rely on the public to apply common sense. Make provision for those who have got some common sense and do take it seriously, and be very visible with it. But yeah, train your staff and give them the right kit. It's essential. Another question, I don't know that any of you guys will know the answer to this, so I might have to go and ask PHE this one, but this is from Dan Jacklin about transmission of the virus from clothing and whether or not we should ask our staff to clean their uniform more frequently. I think back to some of my recce's in the day, getting them to clean their uniform at all was often a challenge. I
can tell you that friends of mine who are kind of senior health and safety people in like cleaning support services, for example, who've got older kids who are still living with them and who are going out to work, you know, they've been getting them to come home, go into the downstairs loo, strip off, and then wash their clothes kind of straight away. So that's just something anecdotal, but from people that kind of, you know, are in this kind of safety and risk world. That might be a bit of overkill, I don't know, but it's just something anecdotal.
I think if you're keeping the 2 metre distancing and those systems are in place, then hopefully, and you know you haven't had people in, you won't know maybe for a few days afterwards with test and trace. But I think so long as you've got rigid processes in place regarding distancing, then it might be. I wouldn't necessarily be writing it into a risk assessment.
No, and Dan, I've looked at, I'm constantly on Public Health England, Public Health Scotland websites, and whilst they are both incredibly helpful, there's very little other than the repeating 2 meters and good hand hygiene. That's over and over and over again. That seems to be the message. But if it's something you'd like me to get an answer to, drop me an email and I'll do that for you.
I think the fear, Tara, is if people write these things into risk assessments and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So just think carefully about those controls that you are putting into your risk assessments. Don't tie yourself up in such knots. Make it real, make it genuine, make it safe, but don't tie yourself up in knots. Yeah. Okay. The other thing, just on relying on the public and their common sense. I think I mentioned this to you a couple of weeks ago, Christian. Would we trust a member of the public with a bottle of spray chemical in their hand? What do you advise that we do issue to the public if we are going to ask them to clean stuff?
I for 2 reasons, would be uncomfortable giving spray bottles out. And I've seen some of the videos that have been published by some operators, and they seem to be split on this point. But firstly, just from an equipment perspective, there will be certain equipment within your facilities that the manufacturer will say you mustn't spray liquids onto the screens, for example. So just from that perspective, you might be invalidating warranties and causing yourself maintenance issues and things like that. From a health and safety perspective, I'm sure it won't happen, but it could happen that, you know, somebody accidentally sprays someone else or in the face or something like that. So I think I would feel more comfortable giving people wipes rather than sprays. I don't know what the guys think about that, but that would be my view.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
So
agree.
just sort of antiseptic wipes. Is there any cost considerations there, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, you would maybe want to use, and I know we've talked about alcohol-based wipes. I mean, the NHS use alcohol as their basis for a lot of cleanliness. So I think alcohol-based wipes, or some of them do say they're viricides wipes that like Christian just said. I've unfortunately seen people spray themselves in the bottle because they've got the gun the wrong way around. So
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to be doing that.
I think the thing with alcohol-based wipes, and indeed any sanitisation, is you've just got to be mindful of not kind of going over and over and over and over a surface, sanitising, or covering your hands with alcohol wipes, and then not doing any of the cleaning bits, because eventually you'll end up with a residue on the surface, which is then going to compromise everything. So it'd be like a petri dish for germs.
Just remember the C&D: clean first, disinfect, clean, disinfect. Yeah, okay. And then the other thing, actually, I was on a webinar the other day for everybody in the audience. Just about every kit supplier has some guidance available to you about what you can and can't use on your kit. Matrix, Live, Technogym, Wattbike, they've all produced some stuff saying the do's and don'ts, and almost entirely they're recommending the use of wipes during the day. And some more specific cleaning, but they've all made it available. So, you know, go back to your kit manufacturers and ask those questions. Okay, so just another question in. I'm glad we're able to answer some of these while we go. Tracy has asked, would you spray fabric office chairs or cover them? I think that's the same as the clothing question, Tracy, really. Is that, you know, provided people are socially distancing, people shouldn't be contracting the virus. The only thing is, which we can do nothing about, is people are asymptomatic or asymptomatic. You know, that's actually the more sinister part of this virus. And also, in answer to your observation, actually, your statement, Keely, about you know, contacting customers and doing some sort of pre-opening questionnaires. Again, if you go to the CIMSPA website, on the reopening page, you'll see something from Alliance Leisure TA6, which is a kind of whole campaign called Make the Comeback. It's free, and it encourages you to interact with your customers and prepare them for reopening. It's just a free resource. I mean, it's just brilliant. And then in addition to that, LeisureNet Solutions got the Refocus, which is on our Stronger Together hub. So there's plenty of stuff out there. You know, this isn't CIMSPA selling. We are only working with partners who are prepared to give their time and resource for free. We are not allowing anybody to sell or upsell anything product-wise. We're only actually interested in working with partners who, like us, just want to support sector and make sure it survives on the other side. Just one final question on cleaning, Christian, and it's around this, I keep hearing this, and I alluded to it at the top, fog cleaning. Do I need to get myself a fogging machine or electrostatic? What is it?
So it's a method of sanitizing or disinfecting. So basically, you've probably seen it on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever videos, but there's different types of kit, but it's basically atomizing and spraying liquid rather than using a trigger spray or a wipe. And fogging is basically blasting it all in one direction. Electrostatic is putting an electrical charge into the chemical, and that means that it kind of clings to surfaces and disperses and spreads itself more evenly. So both are very efficient ways of sanitizing or disinfecting surfaces. So we use electrostatic machines ourselves if we're doing this as a service for clients. But obviously we go and clean all the surfaces physically first. Some of the challenges that I'm seeing are that people are talking about, I can think of one operator who put a video out saying we're using electrostatic cleaning. Foggers and electrostatic sprayers don't clean anything. They're sanitizing or disinfecting, they're not cleaning. So what people are potentially seeing is they're being lured into a bit of a false sense of security, whether that's by someone selling them the kit or somebody selling them the service. You know, I'm going to come in and fog your office and it's then safe. Well, no, you need to be doing the cleaning bit first. Otherwise, that second part of it is unlikely to be effective. So I think they certainly have their place. From an operational efficiency perspective, you know, thinking about doing a gym, you know, filled with equipment, those methods are going to be much quicker for you guys to use to do that sanitizing and disinfecting than doing it manually. So it's certainly worth thinking about, but you just need to understand what they are doing and what they're not doing, and make sure that you do that whole process as the, you know, as the Fit Together guidance framework sets out.
That's excellent, Christian, thank you. And I've just got one more, actually.
Okay.
So an action out of this is that you're happy to help us come up with a sort of list of what cleans and a list of what disinfects. You know, if I'd stick that in my cleaning cupboard, I think, for Rakis or whoever's doing the cleaning, just say, here you go, clean first, disinfect with this.
Yeah.
Clean this frequently and disinfect it this frequently. You know, just a really plain and simple guide per area would be fabulous. I know we were going to talk about swimming pools and chlorine and all the rest of it, but we're kind of running out of time slightly. Plus, I'm also covering all of that tomorrow.
Yeah. All I'd say on swimming is, you know, swimming in a pool is probably the safest thing you could do in a leisure facility right now, from a COVID perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting, again, myth busting. There's been lots of, you know, talk about air circulation and whether or not swimming pools are man enough for the job. Just think about it, just use common sense. The size of the pool halls are usually much larger than a standard office or a pub, and therefore dilution rates are increased. There are often high humidity rates in swimming pools, and the virus molecules in high humidity drop quicker to a surface than they are airborne in a swimming pool. So there are loads and loads of pluses, plus chlorine levels at a certain, you know, at the correct levels. There is some evidence that they're effective against the virus. Just to give you a bit of an update on that, the chlorine kills the virus is a theory. And it's a worldwide theory. However, it's not yet been proven. And the UK is looking like it's going to be the first country to prove it. There are some tests and research being undertaken as we speak, Wednesday, Thursday of this week. So I'll keep you guys posted, but I actually think we'll be open before we get the results. But it would be nice, you know, to prove that theory.
Yeah, I mean, Public Health England specifically talks about a chlorine-based solution to use for disinfecting in the event of a known case. But all I would say is that the dilution rates that they talk about for that are significantly higher than you would find in a pool. So, you know, it's like anything, you know, if it's at a different level of concentration, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in the same way. So, you know, we need to see proper testing. But every scientist I've spoken with about this, you know, when I ask them about swimming in a pool, everybody thinks, you know, that's a safe thing to do.
Yeah, and one of the professors, Dr. Helen, who sits on, she sits as an advisor on SAGE, also sits in the PUTAG working group around this. So there's some consistency there. There's a question about saunas and steam rooms, which if anybody, I don't know if Ian and Jill could help us out on that one. I've heard all sorts of answers to that question. What's the advice on opening saunas and steam rooms?
I think it's as much a sustainability issue, because to keep social distancing within that close confines is going to restrict how you manage that facility. If you can make it work financially, that you can have 1 or 2 people from one household in there at any one time, depends on how big your facility is, of course. If you've got a huge sauna, you can have as many people as you want, as long as they're 2 metre distance. But I think you've got to think those things through. I think there's much to do with your own sustainability issue and how you manage the control of people in and out, and particularly the harder surfaces in a steam room, the cleaning of those potentially in between.
Yeah. Quick question, Jill.
Can I just add to that? When we did our clinics, our very first clinic was about a response plan, and the question that we posed to people at that point was, the first thing you need to ask yourselves is what facilities were going to open. So some organisation might have 20 facilities, and the first question is actually, were we going to open all 20, or were we going to open 25%? The next question, it was to ask yourselves, once we know what facilities we're opening, actually what activities and what facilities are we going to open in each of those sites. And we actually said that health suites and saunas and steam room would definitely be at the bottom of those lists. When we reopen, we're going to reopen in a new norm. Some people might say that gyms and fitness classes are going to be the easiest part to open. So let's get the ones open which A, are easier, and secondly are going to generate your income. Let's be honest here, health suites probably don't break even at the moment, and why add extra risk into what's going to be quite a stressful time for a lot of people when they reopen. So our advice would be, yes, you can open them, but think carefully about that, and let's maybe put that at stage 2 or stage 3 or even stage 4, because they are going to be harder to mitigate the risk on those activity areas. Yeah,
Jill, that's great. Okay, listen, we're going to have, I think we could probably go on forever, but we've got 6 minutes before it's 4:30. So first of all, thank you guys for your time and for your expertise. I've learned an awful lot from this session, so thank you very much for that. For those who are on the webinar, it's an incredible number who stayed on, so well done. We'll ask for feedback, but we're not just asking for feedback, you know, did you enjoy it, you know, do you like Phil, he's got a lovely t-shirt on, or anything like that. We're also very interested to know if you want to know more, and whether or not you'd like us to run another one of these and ask some more specific questions. My gut feeling says that these won't stop even when we're open. I think once we're open, we're going to start having more and more questions that we need to address. So we'll carry on. Again, just a reminder, Phil, is it 2 o'clock tomorrow, mate?
It's 2:30 with Swim England and RLSS. Yeah, I've put the link in the chat box for anyone that hasn't booked into that webinar.
Yeah, we'll just keep running them. You know, let us know. Let us know what you need. That's our job, is to provide answers for you, and it's what we're paid to do. So keep talking to us, and we'll keep going to get experts like these guys to talk back to you. Thanks for your time, everybody. Thanks for your thanks in the inbox. Phil, you'll be sending out all of the annotated.
Absolutely, yeah. So everyone who's attended this webinar, you'll receive all the notes, all of the questions with the answers that we've gone through, and as Tara mentioned, you'll get the opportunity to give us your feedback, which we'll look forward to.
Brilliant. Thank you very much all. Enjoy the rest of the week, and let's hope for some good news this week. Take care. Bye now.